Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports, where today there's some stuff going on in Philadelphia with the Flyers right now, so we got to talk about that as well as other news and notes around the NHL and the NCAA. Guys, thank you all for joining us here again at I-80 Sports. Thank you all for joining us here again at I-80 Sports. If you're listening to us on your favorite streaming platform and listening to our podcast, you might want to check out our YouTube page down below, youtube.com/I-80 Sports. There you can find all of our content, all of our NHL content, our MLS content, our NFL content, because the draft's going to be coming up quite soon. And yeah, come check out our content there. While you're there, drop a comment down below. Let us know what you think is going on in Philadelphia. Do you like what's going on there? Are you scared about what's going on there? You got to let us know down below. Drop a comment, hit the like button, and hit subscribe and hit the bell notification so that way you guys know when we go live or when others go live. And if you follow us on Twitter, or if you don't follow us on Twitter for that matter, make sure you follow us down below at I-80_Sports NHL. And if you follow us already, thank you guys so much because we greatly value all of your support. I'm Brian. He's Tom. Tom, how are you doing today?
Doing well. And here we are. We were gone for about, 2 weeks now. So, yeah. But we're back again, back at it. I was in Arizona about a week ago, so it was a little difficult to get the show done. But I'm back in New Jersey now. I'm back home.
Oh, I know that you were probably just ripping to watch some Arizona Coyotes hockey at Mullet Arena.
I actually wasn't anywhere near there. I was down in Tucson, which is like as far south as you can get. Yeah. Maybe not as far south as you can get, about an hour north of the Mexican border. So Phoenix was about a good 2 hours north of me. I wasn't driving 2 hours to go and do that.
I don't blame you. I don't think anybody even wants to drive 15 minutes to go watch that team right now, to be fair. Sorry to all the Arizona Coyotes fans out there, all 12 of you. Nonetheless, oh well. For now, let's get into the news of the week. Let's hit up that traffic report.
The I-80 Sports Traffic Report, where you can find all your news and notes from the week.
As you guys know, our traffic report is for our news and notes around the NHL, which we got to start with some non-NHL news first, because the NCAA ice hockey tournament has already commenced and has already begun. Tom, let's talk some favorites. Let's talk some players to watch. Who are your favorites and why? And who are some players to watch as we get closer to the Frozen Four and just this tournament in general?
I got to say, it's a very Big Ten heavy tournament. Your two obvious favorites right now are Minnesota and Michigan. Minnesota was actually number one in the Big Ten as well. Michigan actually beat them in the Big Ten title game. Didn't matter. Michigan still comes in as a number one overall seed into this tournament. An obvious player to watch here for me is Adam Fantilli for the aforementioned Michigan Wolverines. 61 points in 33 games played this year, 27 goals, 34 assists. Projected to go number 2 in the draft behind some guy named Bedard. I don't think anybody's ever heard of him. I don't know where.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a bit of a scrub if you ask me. I don't know.
So this Fantilli was teammates with this guy named Bedard, but just with the experience and the depth that Canada had in the World Juniors, he didn't get much of a look. So this tournament's really, really going to be his time to shine. And I find it a little bit similar to Jack Eichel playing with BU all those years ago in 2015, where it was kind of Jack Eichel's time to shine, where this was his stage to shine and show the world what he was made of. Another player to watch here will be Logan Cooley for those aforementioned Minnesota Golden Gophers. Went number 3 last year to those aforementioned Arizona Coyotes. Nice year so far for the Gophers. 19 goals, 33 assists, 52 points in 35 games played. He's another one to watch. I got a funny feeling that Cooley will not be playing for Minnesota anymore next year. He will be playing for Arizona. I don't think he'll find the arena life much different for home games, but that's a story for another day. Just a real quick update for you guys here, and I want to just see if I can get this over. Some games are live right now in One bracket here, we have St. Cloud State up 2-0 on Minnesota State. The winner of that game will play Minnesota and Kansas, who actually are playing later on tonight. In one of our other brackets here, we have Cornell up 2-0 on Denver right now, end of the second period. The winner of that's going to play Boston University, who thrashed Western Michigan 5-1 earlier today, so they're already through. The other brackets do not start till tomorrow. Our other bracket here has Michigan, who we spoke about, versus Colgate, along with Penn State and Michigan Tech. And our final bracket here is Quinnipiac and Merrimack. Say that like 17 times fast. Say if your tongue doesn't get twisted. And the infamous Harvard versus the Ohio State University, two of the most arrogant colleges in the world, playing against each other. Wondering how that'll go down. But that's just a quick rundown on it. Games are going to be on all weekend. Semifinals take place today and tomorrow, and we'll have our regional finals Saturday and Sunday. And then in 2 weeks, they'll play the Frozen Four to determine who wins the whole thing.
Literally just going back and forth in my head, going Quinnipiac, Merrimack. I can't even do it now. I was doing it in my head, and I can't do it out loud. Quinnipiac, Merrimack, whatever. Anyway, talking about the NCAA hockey tournament right now, talking about some favorites and some players to watch here. And as Tom mentioned before, it's not just Big Ten heavy. It's very Big Ten heavy. In my own personal bias, and I know this is not going to happen, I would love an early exit for the University of Michigan, for the Michigan Wolverines, just to see Luke Hughes and Seamus Casey sign their entry-level contracts with the New Jersey Devils early and possibly play a few games before the end of the regular season. The pair of this defenseman really to watch here, if you're a Devils fan, I mean, unless you've been living under a rock, you know it's Luke Hughes. We know what Luke Hughes is. We've known him as an entity for the past year and a half now. But some might not necessarily know his stats and know what him and Seamus Casey bring to the defensive table for not only the University of Michigan, but maybe for the future of the New Jersey Devils. They are both defensemen that are great at transition and speed, and they're great in transition. They have very good breakout instincts. They're not like Simon Nemec, where they slow the game down like he does in his own zone. But Seamus Casey and Luke Hughes are more of kill with speed. And that's exactly what the mantra of the New Jersey Devils is right now. And both have done quite well with that. Seamus Casey racked up 25 points in 35 games this season as a defenseman, and Luke Hughes racked up 42 points in 36 games as a defenseman. In Luke Hughes' breakdown, we had 9 goals and 33 assists in those 36 games played. For Seamus Casey, we had 7 goals and 18 assists in 34 games played, actually. I apologize. So 25 points in 34 games for Seamus Casey. You love to hear that, and you love to see that, because before Dougie Hamilton came around, you did see a lack of point production on the defensive side for the New Jersey Devils. The most that you had before that was Damon Severson. And even then, he wasn't necessarily lighting the world on fire from the defensive front. So if you're a Devils fan, this definitely excites you. Other players, non-Devils prospects to watch here, obviously Adam Fantilli, and he's possibly the consensus number 2 overall pick in this year's NHL draft, barring any kind of defensive surprise or maybe even the rise again of Matvei Michkov. Michigan's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I'm just looking at their prospect pool here. Frank Nazar is also a player worth mentioning here, who's a prospect for the Chicago Blackhawks. Rutger McGroarty.
Nazar, I looked at Nazar's stats. He's not having that good of a year, to be honest with you.
No, he's not, but he's still worth talking about because he was the number 13 overall pick from this past year, and he was acquired for Kirby Dach for the Chicago Blackhawks. So you like to kind of see what you got for that trade, especially since Kirby Dach has slowly found his game with Montreal. Rutger McGroarty is also worth mentioning for the Winnipeg Jets, who was drafted number 14 overall, in fact, after Frank Nazar. Mackie Samoskevich, Eric Portillo is also another goaltender to watch as well. Another goaltender for me to really watch in this tournament. I think the consensus best goaltender in this current tournament actually plays for Boston University. It's Drew Comesso, another Chicago Blackhawk prospect. 20 years old, and he's absolutely factoring in Chicago's rebuild plans right now, and I think he's a lot of fun to watch. Another person to watch for Denver would be Magnus Krona, who's a goaltending prospect for the San Jose Sharks at the age of 22. Could possibly be a factor in the next year or two, maybe at the NHL level, but we'll see. Obviously, Logan Cooley is worth mentioning as well. Jimmy Snuggerud, drafted number 23 overall in 2022 by the St. Louis Blues. Worth mentioning here too, 18 years old and had a relatively steady year for the Minnesota Golden Gophers. So it's going to be interesting to watch. If you're going to ask me in terms of a favorite for this tournament, I think Minnesota and Michigan are kind of your favorites at the moment in this tournament. Just watch out for Boston University here. Just because Drew Comesso, I think, is going to be a goaltender that's going to be really, really hard to solve for a lot of teams. And I think that was already found today, winning 5-1 and only letting up one goal in that game. So really, really interesting to watch. Moving on to the NHL side of things, we didn't have a lot of NHL news, but there was one big news tidbit that dropped yesterday relating to jerseys and the fate of the on-ice jersey in the NHL has been in limbo since Adidas has decided to pull back from their agreement, and it left the NHL as a free agent. And we seem to have some mixed reviews here from a lot of fans on this one, because as it turns out, signing a 10-year deal to replace Adidas is Fanatics. And I find it very interesting that now they're the on-ice and off-ice provider for the NHL, for apparel, for jerseys. This is going to be an interesting move, and it's certainly divisive. Tom, good move by the NHL, safe move. What do you think?
I would say more of a safe move if you were to ask me. In terms of hockey, it's still, you've seen the major apparel and equipment providers get into the apparel side and the equipment side. You saw Nike do it, you saw Reebok do it, and they were out of it just as quick as they were into it. Adidas, I guess, was a little bit smarter in terms of they only wanted to do jerseys. They didn't want to do any other equipment. So I guess that was smart by them. But I guess, Adidas, it's the same thing. Maybe they just determined that their investment into doing this, they weren't getting a good enough ROI from it. I guess the thing with Fanatics is, in terms of marketing and in terms of a footprint and brand awareness, Fanatics is pretty big. They've made strides in the sports apparel industry over the years. So they're there, and a lot of people go into Fanatics to buy stuff, myself included. I buy a lot of stuff from Fanatics, believe it or not. I'm a soccer fan. I like Bayern Munich. They're my team in Europe. I don't like the way the Adidas Bayern Munich t-shirts fit. I don't like that tight European cut. I like kind of the baggy American cut, and I can get a baggy American cut Bayern Munich t-shirt from Fanatics. So I'm not so much anti-Fanatics. I think that in terms of getting the apparel sold, it's good for the NHL. I'm sort of a purist in a way where I would have liked to have seen CCM come back. But then again, it's all about money and marketing and trying to build a brand. And CCM does not exactly reach your regular Joe Schmo sports fan. Some of them probably don't even know what CCM is. Same thing with Bauer. They're just hockey companies in general, and their focus is more on making apparel. Fanatics' focus is more on not apparel, equipment. I'm sorry. Fanatics is more focused on making apparel. So I don't know. I'm 50-50 on this. I don't particularly love it. I would have liked to have seen CCM get back into the game in some way, shape, or form. But at the end of the day, in terms of the league and trying to get themselves out there, I can understand why they did it.
See, for me, it might not be the sexiest move, but it's the comfortable move for the NHL, which when you're in this kind of weird time in the NHL where they're really focused on marketing, they're really focused on brand elevation, I think this is a safe move for the NHL in the sense that they're comfortable with Fanatics. They've dealt with them for the past number of years. They're a known entity, and they know their product, and they know it's a quality product. I've seen a lot of fans that are quick to the trigger of like, oh, the Fanatics jerseys are terrible. The Fanatics jerseys are bad, this and that. They rip easily. They do this, they do that, blah, blah, blah. Those are the off-ice jerseys, though. They're not jerseys made to play organized hockey in.
They're jerseys made to wear to a game.
Exactly.
That you're watching.
They're meant to have a beer dumped on you pretty much. Like, it's not something to literally go out on the ice with. Can you? Yes. Is it going to be good quality? No. So it's left to be seen what the quality of the jersey that they're going to put onto the ice is. But I actually do trust Fanatics to provide a quality product. And the thing that I like about Fanatics is they've provided the fans a more affordable option for those families that can't necessarily always afford the Adidas, or those individuals that can't always afford the Adidas jersey or the Reebok jersey. I think it's a win-win for the fans, for the NHL players, for the league. I think that this is a perfectly fine move. I think the jury is still out until we actually see the on ice product. Obviously, we haven't seen a rollout yet of what the on ice jersey is going to look like, the official on ice jersey with a fight strap in the back, sized for pads, cut for goalies. So until we see that, I think the jury's still out. And I think it's also unfair to kind of judge based on what we've already seen. But based on what we've already seen, I love the extra. I love the other apparel. The t-shirts are great. The hats for the draft are also really nice as well. Fanatics has done a pretty decent job, so I really don't understand a lot of fans very quick to the trigger and putting them down. It's left to be seen. Let's see what happens. Let's judge once we get to the regular season and we see kind of how these jerseys hold up in the middle of a game. Though I will admit, the memes so far on the jersey rips have been nice and spicy and nice. Keep them coming, trolls. Keep them coming. Before we move on from our news, we've got some injuries that we need to catch up on from the past few weeks. We've really kind of ignored injuries in general from the past few weeks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on just March in general, even, smaller injuries too. For the Arizona Coyotes, Zach Cassian and Josh Brown are day-to-day with an undisclosed injury and an upper body injury. For Boston, Derek Forbort day-to-day with a lower body injury that's dating back to March 15th. For the Buffalo Sabres, just like perfect timing for them. Jordan Greenway, Eric Comrie, and Matthias Samuelsson all day-to-day with upper, lower, and upper body injuries, respectively. Calgary, Chris Tanev, again, perfect timing for them when they're trying to get on a roll. Chris Tanev is day-to-day with an upper body injury. Probably the biggest one here to mention from Carolina. Andrei Svechnikov will miss the remainder of the regular season and more than likely also the playoffs as well with a torn ACL. You hate to see it too. Antti Ranta is also day-to-day with an undisclosed injury, which I think he's since back from. I'm not quite sure. I'd have to check up on that one. Chicago, there's just way too many to mention, and I'm just going to be honest here.
They're done.
They're done. I don't care about Chicago. I'm sorry, Chicago fans, but you know it too. Colorado, Evan Rodriguez, Cale Makar, and Arturi Lekkinen are day-to-day with some significant injuries from what it looks like. Evan Rodriguez left the game with a concussion, Cale Makar with a lower body injury, and Arturi Lekkinen with a fractured finger. Josh Manson also has a day-to-day injury dating back to February 28th with a lower body injury. Can't remember if he's actually played a game since then. I feel like he has, though. I'm just not sure. Columbus, again, not that I really care, but I'll still mention Elvis Merzlikins is day-to-day for personal reasons of personal illness, and Sean Corrali is also day-to-day with an oblique injury. For the Dallas Stars, Mason Marchment, Tyler Seguin, and Scott Wedgwood are all day-to-day with lower body injuries. All of them. I'm beginning to think that the lower body injury is now becoming the most chronic injury in the NHL. It's uncurable. The Detroit Red Wings, Adam Erne, Simon Edvinsson, Ben Sherratt, and Robbie Fabry, all day-to-day as well. Moving down to Edmonton, Ryan McLeod day-to-day with an undisclosed injury. Florida Panthers, just as they get Anthony Duclair back, he's day-to-day with illness, as well as Sam Bennett being day-to-day with an undisclosed injury as well. The LA Kings, Kevin Fiala and Sean Dursey, both day-to-day with lower body and undisclosed injuries. The Minnesota Wild, Jared Spurgeon and Kirill Kaprizov, both day-to-day, but I think Kaprizov has almost certainly played since then. So the Montreal Canadiens, again, they're done. I'm not going to mention their laundry list of injuries here. It would take too long. Nashville Predators, Roman Josi day-to-day with an undisclosed injury, as well as Alexander Carrier with an upper body injury. New Jersey Devils, Curtis Lazar, Miles Wood, and Nathan Bastian all day-to-day with lower body undisclosed and upper body injuries, respectively. The New York Islanders, Brock Nelson, Sebastian Aho, Josh Bailey, all day-to-day as well. I just love the distinction of day-to-day. It's just like, we don't really know. We're just going day-to-day.
Anta is still day-to-day, by the way. He's not dressed for the Hurricanes.
Who's again?
Antti Ranta. He's still day-to-day.
Yeah, I kind of figured. New York Rangers, no injuries. Nice. The Ottawa Senators, Dylan Ferguson, Parker Kelly, Matthew Joseph, and Cam Talbot all day-to-day as well. Moving down to the Philadelphia Flyers, Travis Konechny has been placed on IR with an upper body injury as well, but their season's been cooked since literally September. Pittsburgh, Marcus Pettersson, IR with a lower body injury. I don't know how long the prognosis for his injury is. Pittsburgh's been bit by the injury bug. Jan Ruta is day-to-day with a lower body injury. Jeff Petrie is out with an upper body injury day-to-day. Dmitry Kulikov is on IR with a lower body injury. And Nick Bonino is on IR with a lacerated kidney. Good Lord. San Jose, Justice Andreas Janssen finds his way back to the NHL. He's day-to-day with a lower body injury, as well as Evgeny Svechnikov, Jacob McDonald, and Radim Semek, all day-to-day with different injuries. The Seattle Kraken, Philip Grubauer, and John Hayden, all day-to-day with an illness and lower body injuries. St. Louis, Tanner Dickinson has been on IR since September. The Tampa Bay Lightning, nothing there to report. Toronto, Ilya Samsonov is day-to-day for personal reasons. Bobby McCann is day-to-day with a knee injury. And TJ Brody is day-to-day with an undisclosed injury. Ryan O'Reilly still not back from a fractured finger, but it's looking like he could possibly return before the end of the regular season, which would be huge for the Toronto Maple Leafs in gearing up for the playoffs. Vancouver, Noah Juleson, day-to-day with a lower body injury. The Vegas Golden Knights, Keegan Colasar, Aiden Hill, and William Carrier, all day-to-day with upper and lower body injuries, respectively. The Washington Capitals, Trevor Van Riemsdyk, Darcy Kemper, day-to-day, personal reasons, and upper body injury. And lastly, the Winnipeg Jets, Cole Perfetti is on IR with an upper body injury. Tom, I know it's going to be stating the obvious here, but what injury or injuries stick out to you the most here?
I mean, it's the obvious one, Andrei Svechnikov. It's no secret. He's the best player on Carolina Hurricanes. And I said myself, and a lot of people said, oh, no, they don't need to do any more at the deadline. I said they needed to do more. They needed to do more, and now with him out, they're stuck with their mistake. Now, obviously, they're winning games. Well aware. They are winning games. And I'm not going to say they're not because I'd be lying to you. The fact is that they are winning games. But I don't know if any of you guys watched the game against the Rangers Tuesday night. They played 90s dead puck era hockey. How well is that going to work in the playoffs nowadays? There's no two-line pass. There's no clutching and grabbing. And you know what? That style it took teams deep, but not all the way. The Florida Panthers got themselves to the finals and got smacked by the Colorado Avalanche in 96. Buffalo Sabres did the same thing and lost to the Dallas Stars. Didn't necessarily get smacked, but lost. And you want to know what those two teams had that Carolina doesn't have? They had superior goaltending. They had a goaltender that they could trust to win them games. Carolina's goaltenders can't stay healthy. The Canes have choked in the playoffs over the last 2 years. And you can't convince me right now that this team is going to go deep and potentially win a Stanley Cup with their best player out, no activity at the deadline. And if they're going to sit there in a neutral zone and play knock hockey, it may work for a game or two. It's not going to get that team deep. It's not. Especially if they were to see a team like Boston. Or if they were to see some another team out there, say like Florida, who I know might be out for blood to get them. I'm sorry, it's not working. And Carolina really shot themselves in their rear end this year at the deadline, and now they're paying for it. And could these Carolina Hurricanes be this decade's version of last decade's San Jose Sharks? A team that was always in the mix, a team that always did good in the regular season, a team that was always on the radar but could never get it done. Could this be this decade's version of the San Jose Sharks? I don't know. We shall see.
It's a bold take, but maybe not too far off there. You always kind of think about Carolina. It's just like, oh man, how are we going to get past Carolina? And then boom, someone gets past Carolina. And mostly because it's ill-timed injuries always for Carolina. If last year it was Freddie Anderson going down with an injury, and Antti Ranta is a plenty fine goaltender, really fine goaltender, but not an every night starting goaltender. The same thing's happening now with the Carolina Hurricanes with Andrei Svechnikov, losing that goal production and that speed on the forecheck. It hurts. And you can tell already that it hurts right now. Yeah, they got past New York Rangers, who have been the hottest team since March 1st. And they snuck out a win this past week against them. But even then, the Devils are on their heels. The Rangers are on their heels. I'm wondering if Carolina by season's end maybe possibly drops to second place, maybe drops to third place. I think it's a stretch. The Rangers right now are making things really difficult in the Metropolitan Division right now. The other team in the Metropolitan Division I think is going to be kind of hurt by the injuries that they're currently dealing with, the Pittsburgh Penguins. That defense is suffering without Marcus Pettersson, Jan Rutta, Jeff Petrie, Dmitry Kulikov. You look at their defensive pairings right now, which I'm looking on Daily Faceoff right now. Pierre-Oliver Joseph and Chris Letang on the top pairing, but then Brian Dumoulin and Chad Ruhwedel on the second pairing. Huh?
Ruhwedel.
Yeah, Chad Ruhwedel. I'm bad at pronunciation, man. Chad Ruhwedel. A little weak of a second pairing, and then Mark Friedman and Taylor Faden on the third pairing. They really need Jeff Petrie, Marcus Pettersson. They really need these guys back here. They really need a stronger defensive pairing. They need Jan Rutta back. They need Dmitry Kulikov back. Even Nick Bonino, filling in the bottom six. Pittsburgh is falling out of the race right now. They were in 8th place at the start of March. They're not in 8th place anymore. Florida's pretty much caught them at this point. And that would be really rough to see, that a team as weak as the Florida Panthers, and as good as Pittsburgh has been this season, it'd be really sad for Pittsburgh to lose it to Florida for the number 8 spot. It would be really, really tough to see. But that is our news for the week. So stick around right now as we pump the brakes and talk about some Philadelphia Flyers and just rain on their parade a little bit more. So let's pump the brakes.
Not so fast. It's time to pump the brakes.
I even came up with an edgy title, Philly Phrenzy, but hey, did you catch the P and the H in front of Frenzy? That's not how you spell frenzy. I'm so damn clever. Anyway, drop some likes. So the Philadelphia Flyers it's no secret, they've been struggling this year. They've been among the worst teams in the NHL this season, racked with problems, fans calling for Chuck Fletcher's head, the former general manager now of the Philadelphia Flyers. And it came to be. And the Philadelphia Flyers, after the trade deadline, up and fired general manager Chuck Fletcher, and have since named former NHL player and former Philadelphia Flyer Daniel Briere as the interim general manager. And I guess we'll start first with understanding that in Philadelphia's case, they're committing to a rebuild. And I don't think that this is going to be a retool. And I think management has pretty much alluded to this is a rebuild now. They're in rebuild mode. They're not in retool mode. There's a big difference between rebuild and retool. And certainly we can educate those that don't necessarily understand that down below and in the comment section down below. But Tom, I'm going to start with you on this one. As we talk about the Philadelphia Flyers here and talk about what happens next for the Philadelphia Flyers, let's talk about the now. Naming Daniel Briere as the interim general manager, is this the right decision for Philadelphia right now? Could you see Philadelphia possibly pivoting to a more permanent solution in the offseason?
I'm not really sure. And right now, it's just a tag. But in my experience, when this is done late in the year and it's an interim tag, it means somebody else is lined up. When the Rangers dumped Jeff Gorton a couple years ago, Drury was not an interim. He was named GM right away. His son didn't do him any favors. I don't think he's going to lose his job. At the very worst, he just gets demoted if they bring somebody else in. I guess the unfortunate part is now Philly's going to be forced to find somebody, and really, who is out there? Honestly, right now, there's just too many unanswered questions to where they're going and what they want to do. We need to know where they land in the draft lottery. And if they are fortunate enough to land Connor Bedard, then you need to bring somebody in who knows how to rebuild the team and who knows how to build a team up from the bottom. Because you can't just waste Connor Bedard for 5 years. The guy's a generational talent. We all know that. We saw him in the World Juniors. There's no secret about it. If it's not Connor Bedard, and it maybe is somebody like Adam Fantilli, who's no knock against him, but is a little less unproven, maybe they do let Briere stay for a year or two. But the root of this wasn't what happened recently. I mentioned this in previous episodes about how starting around, let's just say, for argument's sake, 2014, this team did themselves no favors by making the playoffs every year and then missing the playoffs the year after. And for most of those years, with the exception of 2020 and the COVID shutdown, they were a low seed all those years. They were never in first or second place. They never had any home ice advantage. You're not going to be able to build any traction from making the playoffs every year, 1 year, and then missing the playoffs the next. And then when you make it, you're a low seed and you're getting knocked out by the Rangers or Pittsburgh or Washington. You're not going to get any traction from that. The problem also stems from their ownership. Their original owner, Ed Snyder was one of those I'll do anything to win owners, or I'll do anything to have my team play a certain way owner. Kind of like George Steinbrenner, kind of like, out in LA with Jerry Buss. They would do anything and everything to have their team win. They didn't care where they finished in the profit. They didn't care where they were in the red or in the black. It didn't matter. They didn't care. They wanted to win. All that mattered to them was winning games, winning championships, and being competitive. I'm not so sure this ownership right now, with Ed Snyder being gone, is caring that much about it. I think right now, in their mind, they want to win, but they want to sell tickets. They want to sell merch. They want to have brand awareness. And the Flyers are lucky enough where they're not a team like the Vegas Golden Knights or the Arizona Coyotes or the Dallas Stars or the Nashville Predators or the like, where they have a history. They have a footprint in that city, and they have the attention in that city where they don't have a lot of competition during the year. Beginning of the year, you have the Eagles and the Phillies. The Eagles play once a week. Depending where the Phillies are in October, they could be out, they could be in. But really, in the wintertime, your only competition is the Sixers. In the springtime, the Philly season is just starting, and the Flyers are more of a priority in Philly over the Sixers. It's not an opinion, it's fact. The Flyers are more of a priority out there. So they're lucky enough in that respect. But the city's given them rabid support through the years, and I think the ownership is taking advantage of that. So right now, there's just so many unanswered things of where this team wants to go and what direction they want to go in. But we really got to see where the draft lottery leads them. And then maybe after that, we can see where they think they want to go.
Yeah. I mean, the Flyers had to move on from Chuck Fletcher. I mean, there's no doubt about that. This is a guy that since he came on in 2018 as the general manager of the Philadelphia Flyers, he's really just set this organization back by at least half a decade. I mean, I'm looking at Cap Friendly right now on some of the contracts that he has signed over the past couple of years. The only contract that he's really not responsible for on this list is James Van Riemsdyk. He signed that deal eons before. But Kevin Hayes, albatross of a contract. Nick Delorier with a no trade clause, and you have him signed through 2026. Yeah, it's a friendly contract, but a no trade clause for a guy who's 32? That's rough. Rasmus Ristolainen, a terrible contract for him. And Tony DeAngelo, another bad contract. Some of these contracts have really, really hurt the Philadelphia Flyers over the past few years to really give them any kind of mobility to do anything. Now, for a lot of people that think that maybe Daniel Briere doesn't necessarily make sense to give the interim tag, I'm not too sure about that. When he retired from the NHL, he was appointed to run day-to-day operations with the Philadelphia Flyers in 2017. So he kind of worked his way up the ladder with the Philadelphia Flyers. As of late, before being named interim general manager, starting in 2021, he was named the special assistant to the general manager. So he's obviously been groomed to eventually become a general manager or an assistant general manager in the league, whether it was with the Philadelphia Flyers or elsewhere. Now, obviously, as Tom mentioned before, and the big elephant in the room is obviously his son has done him no favors, and it's left a lot of people to say, well, if he can't even manage his own kid, how is he going to manage an organization? But I don't think that's necessarily indicative of a person's professional performance.
He manages his own kid. Danny Briere's in Philly. His kid is up near Montreal somewhere. That's got to be thrown out the window.
I've seen plenty of bad parents be really good managers at their job or do their job very well. I've seen vice versa. So, it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily imply one way or the other. So it's not fair to even say, could it possibly cost Daniel Briere and his reputation? Sure, it can. It absolutely can. And especially with the mission that the NHL tries to go for with inclusivity in the NHL. But then again, a lot of players are also not doing a lot of favors to that either. But I guess the question becomes, well, who else could be the permanent solution? And I offer one suggestion of a person who currently is not a general manager. He's currently an advisor with another team, and a person that has currently rebuilt 2 other organizations. Might I offer up Ray Shero as a possibility? He is currently an advisor with the Minnesota Wild right now, and he was appointed to rebuild the Pittsburgh Penguins back in the mid-2000s. He was also appointed to rebuild the Devils in the mid-2010s and picked up the pieces that Lou Lamoriello spread everywhere. So if anybody can help kind of gather the pieces back together and at least form some cohesion, Ray Shero would be a really, really good candidate that I think the Flyers organization should at least consider before removing the interim tag from Daniel Briere. That being said, I think it's also worth giving Daniel Briere the shot, maybe in the offseason, just to see what he does. What does he do with some of these contracts? What does he do with managing the lineup for next year and trying to make this team remotely competitive? Because right now you have a competitive coach with an AHL team. So it's up to Daniel Briere to kind of pick up the pieces from there. Part of managing these pieces is trying to recognize who are your building blocks and who is going to be cast off to the side. So, Tom, let's talk about that. Let's talk about some players for the Philadelphia Flyers that are untouchable and others that we could see change cities. So I'll leave this to you first. Who do you think is untouchable for the Philadelphia Flyers, and who are some maybe surprise names that we could see change cities in the offseason and leave Philadelphia?
Well, I'm going to go backwards here, actually. I think James Van Riemsdyk is a goner. They tried to trade him at the deadline. They didn't get the trade call in time. He's a goner as soon as the season's over. Where he may go, I really don't know. That's going to be a story for another day. They are dangling Carter Hart, and I think if they can get a decent enough return for him, they may trade him too. An interesting one in the room here is Kevin Hayes. I think that Kevin Hayes is liked in Philly. I think the organization likes him. I think that if they could get value for him, they would trade him, but I just think that contract is so much of an albatross that nobody that's a contending or a playoff team would take on that contract. So I think they're stuck with him. Brendan Lemieux, I think, was kind of brought in for color, and I think he's a player that the Philadelphia fans would love. So I think they're going to keep him. But, I mean, you look up and down this lineup here, it's not good. It's not good. And, outside of those guys that I mentioned, this is not a good team. And a lot of these guys are no names or players that are past their prime or players that nobody's going to be really interested in taking on their cap hit or bringing them in to replace somebody. So believe it or not, outside of James Van Riemsdyk and Carter Hart, I think a lot of these guys will be back next year, unfortunately. I mean, unless somebody comes in with some crazy offer, I think a lot of these guys are going to be back. And the other problem with that is you have Ryan Ellis, Sean Couturier, and Cam Atkinson on your IR right now, and Travis Konechny, who you could potentially get some value for, but you can't trade them right now because they're injured. So that's another problem in itself.
It's also left to be seen what is, what's happening with Ryan Ellis, what's happening with Sean Couturier. They've missed more than significant time at this point. So it's really left to be seen. Are they anything for Philadelphia at this point? I honestly would say Sean Couturier is still worth trying to see if he's still worth keeping around for this rebuild, because he is a good liaison for the organization and still an important player for this organization. But going beyond that, I think you do have some semi-obvious names that could stick around during this rebuild. The first one that comes to mind, just looking at cap friendly, Joel Farabee. Joel Farabee at 23 years old and a point producer is signed to such a friendly contract, which could also be the reason why they could possibly move him for some really good assets, being at such a friendly deal. But I feel like Joel Farabee is untouchable. I think Owen Tippett is untouchable, given what you traded to get him in Claude Giroux. Tyson Forster, former first-round pick, Cutter Gauthier, who hasn't signed his ELC yet and will probably do that quite soon. Morgan Frost, Bobby Brink are other guys in the organization that I think are untouchables at the moment. Travis Sanheim and Cam York on the defensive side of the puck that I think are untouchable. Travis Sanheim also signed to a pretty friendly contract as well. And Scott Lawton, I think, is on the untouchable side. Even though he's 28, starting to approach his prime, I think his contract and just his longevity with the team kind of states that maybe he's going to stick it out for a little while, maybe end up being the elder statesman on this team after the rebuild is done, possibly. And it's kind of tough for me to imagine him in a different uniform at the moment. I would honestly, and I know this might be controversial because of how many times this guy has come up in conversation, I would be honestly surprised to see Carter Hart go because of his age and the potential ceiling of his game. We're talking about a guy that has as high a ceiling as a top 10 goaltender in the NHL, I think. Maybe even goes beyond that at the highest of the ceiling. He doesn't have a bad contract right now. I know his stats sometimes say otherwise, but he's also playing in front of a really, really bad team right now. It's going to be up to management to really decide, is he in the plans post rebuild? Does the rebuild take him past his prime? Which would be really sad to see because he's only 23. And if it takes him past his prime, that means that this rebuild would have lasted like 8 or 9 years. And I just can't see it taking that long to rebuild Philadelphia. So I don't know. I think Philadelphia's really going to have to think about what they would want to get from Carter Hart, because it would take a king's ransom, I think, for him to be traded from Philadelphia, to be honest. I don't see a buy low situation for any team here. I think there's still a lot of talent there. All the names that Tom mentioned before are also names that I think could easily be moved as well. I mean, not easily moved, but like Kevin Hayes could be a guy that if a team manages to open their wallet, maybe a Seattle Kraken type of team that has the open cap space, maybe takes him on. Otherwise, yeah, Kevin Hayes is probably stuck with this team. Rasmus Ristolainen probably stuck with this team, and you deal with it. As much as a lot of armchair GMs are just like, oh yeah, we got to trade Rasmus Ristolainen. Who's going to take Rasmus Ristolainen at that contract? Nobody. Thank you, Chuck Fletcher. But one name that I wouldn't be surprised is not in a Philadelphia uniform next year is probably their best defenseman right now, Ivan Provorov. A player that was marred by controversy literally a few weeks ago at this point. And it goes even beyond the controversy. I think this is a player that I think does not want to sit through a rebuild when he's about to enter the prime of his career. I think Philadelphia would kind of owe it to him to trade him to a contender and go hook on with the team. Ristolainen, as I mentioned before, I think that's a tough contract to move. I think it's going to be really tough to move Rasmus Ristolainen. I think other wildcard players to watch and maybe possibly be on the move. Travis Konechny, once he's eventually off IR, could be a name in the offseason that could attract some teams. Maybe Boston, once they lose a lot of their contracts in this offseason, maybe could pivot towards trying to make a trade for Travis Konechny. We've heard the rumors about Jake DeBrusk being on their trading block. Maybe they do a 1-for-1 Jake DeBrusk for Travis Konechny. Bring in some grit, bring in somebody on that side that can kind of fill the role that could be left by Tyler Bertuzzi when he potentially becomes a UFA in this offseason. Could be an interesting move for Boston. On the other side of things, Tony DeAngelo, I think, is another obvious wild card here that I don't see him sticking with Philadelphia after this year. I would be very surprised if he's in Philadelphia on opening night. And Cam Atkinson. The only reason why I'm going to say Cam Atkinson here, because it's going to segue us into our next point here, which is John Tortorella. John Tortorella is the current head coach of the Philadelphia Flyers, and Cam Atkinson has seemingly followed Tortorella wherever he's gone, being in Columbus and then being in Philadelphia. So I guess the question becomes, I could only see Cam Atkinson not in Philadelphia uniform if John Tortorella is not behind the bench. So that being said, Tom, does John Tortorella stay for the beginning of this rebuild? Or could a new coach be coming on for a potential rebuild?
Well, we really need to see what happens with the draft lottery here. But right now, I think he's safe. He's been proven to turn young teams around in Tampa. Tampa, he obviously had a lot to work with LeCavalier and San Luis and Richards. New York, he sort of did the same thing where I remember the one season where Marian Gaborik and Chris Drury went down early. And he literally just put the team on the shoulders of Ryan Callahan, Brandon Dubinsky, Mark Stoll, and Dan Girardi, and said, obviously he had Lundqvist in that, but he said, take it and go. And they played pretty respectable hockey. And obviously Columbus, while Columbus didn't win a cup like Tampa or didn't get themselves deep in the playoffs like the Rangers, he still was getting them to a respective record for the most part until his message wore off. The problem is the draft lottery here. It depends where they finish and who they draft. The issue I could see here is, if you remember, Tampa kind of overhyped Vinny LeCavalier, if you remember. And LeCavalier was given number one center minutes, was given the captaincy, was given all. When Tortorella came in and curbed his ice time, took his C away, and, basically just told him, basically put him in line, and he became a better player for it. They won a cup from it. But, guys, let's be real here. Connor Bedard is not Vinny LeCavalier. Or Vinny LeCavalier is not Connor Bedard. And I guess what you could say is here, if they do wind up with Bedard, do you really want Tortorella to ruin this guy? Where you have somebody with so much talent, do you really want Tortorella to ruin this guy? And it turns into even more of a circus there, and you get set back even more. So it's going to depend on where the draft lottery is. It depends on who they get and where they wind up. And if it is Bedard, I don't think Tortorella stays. I really don't. But if it isn't, I think he does stay. I think his job is safe.
See, for me, and I agree with you that I don't think Tortorella is the ideal coach when bringing in a potential talent like Connor Bedard and even Cutter Gauthier, for that matter, too, who a lot of people forget the Flyers drafted with the number 6 overall pick and is very talented as well. It does depend on the lottery, but I also personally would not be the least bit surprised if even John Tortorella were to step down on his own accord and just say, you know what, this ain't for me. This is not my thing. I thought we were going to be more competitive, because I think a lot of people figured when John Tortorella hooked on with the Philadelphia Flyers that the Flyers were actually going to be a more competitive team. And lo and behold, they haven't. They've been bottom of the barrel in the NHL. I don't know if John Tortorella wants to be a part of that, if they're going to be the punching bag for the next few years here, because there's no bit of polish that John Tortorella can really put on this team right now or the next year or two to make this team remotely competitive, unless you bring in a Connor Bedard. Connor Bedard is an organization-changing player, I think. I don't know if Tortorella wants to be around for that, though. I don't think Tortorella wants to be on a team that is just going to have a losing record season in, season out. So that's why I would not be surprised if John Tortorella were to step down on his own accord, and Philadelphia needing to kind of figure out, okay, who's going to come in and coach this young team and maybe see where we go. Because right now, Philadelphia doesn't need a competitive coach. they need a nurturing coach. They need a coach to kind of come in and kind of navigate the minefields for a younger roster and to kind of ease them into competition and kind of guide them into the beginning of their NHL career. Just like with the New Jersey Devils, when they needed John Hines to be the kind of that nurturing voice, that kind of college voice for them, and then eventually transition to a more rougher and tougher around the edges, Lindy Ruff. Same thing happened in Calgary with Daryl Sutter as well. And now we're kind of seeing that maybe Daryl Sutter is not necessarily the answer in Calgary. Could be the same thing in Philadelphia. It's left to be seen. A lot going on in Philadelphia, but what do you guys think down below? Let us know what you guys think. Before we go, we got to talk some performance from this week. We got to talk about some guys that are doing some moving and shaking around the league. Let's talk high performance.
Your I-80 Sports High Performance Players of the Week.
Ooh, Tom, I got a feeling that you're going to be a homer this week because of how well New York has been playing. So come on, hit me with it. Who are some of your players of the week?
Only going with Mika Zibanejad because it's obvious. 9 points in 4 games played. Of course, now they look snake bit right now against Carolina, but still 2 periods left in that game. Connor McDavid, 11 points in 5 games played, 60th goal last night. Wow. Wow. I try to shy away from him, but I can't. I just can't right now. And Cale Makar, 10 points in 5. The Avs are creeping up until last night where they got bombed by the Penguins. But could this be a situation with the Avalanche, especially if they do get healthy at the very end, where they're that team who kind of is lying in the weeds all year, and on the last day of the season they wind up winning the Central Division? You never know.
Yeah, it's been nuts to see. Colorado, we already kind of pegged from a while ago that Colorado could be, on the surge and maybe make their way back. And I think it's happening. I think, with Nathan McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen with 14 and 12 points in their last 8 games respectively, absolutely helps in that endeavor. Connor McDavid, big ups there, 14 points in 7 games, hitting goal number 60. If he's not your Hart Trophy winner, who is at this point? Because, he's basically kind of forced the, hard conversation for himself at the moment. One player I do want to mention I'm going to mention 2 players on bad teams here. Clayton Keller has been one of the best players in the past 8 games, 15 points in his last 8 games, 8 goals in his last 8 games played on a not very good franchise for that matter. But good to see Clayton Keller being a good sport about it and, still putting up some major points for a bad franchise. And Barrett Hayton coupling along with him, 12 points in 8 games. Could Barrett Hayton finally be finding his game after being a bit of a dud the past few years? Would be really, really fun to see. Tim Stützle of the Ottawa Senators, I want to give a special mention to. First of all, 12 points in his last 8 games. He's really coming into his own. And a lot of people were very quick to kind of, crap on the contract that he got in Ottawa and said, oh, it's too much. It's too soon. It's too much too soon for him. You can't be paying him that money. Well, here's a little fun little tidbit, because a lot of comparisons go to Leon Draisaitl when it comes to him because they're both German centers. So Leon Draisaitl in his first 200 games in NHL play, 53 goals, 93 assists, 146 points. When you also consider that he was also playing a large chunk of those games with Connor McDavid. Tim Stützle, in 197 games played to start his NHL career, 69 goals, 96 assists, 165 points. He has more points than Leon Draisaitl minus 3 games. And it's not even by a little bit. It's by 10 points and minus 3 games. Tim Stützle is becoming the real deal, and it's really, really fun to watch. And I think we could be talking about him as a top center in the NHL in the next few years, and you'll love to see it. Before we go and before we wrap up our episode, let's go to our question of the day, which you can answer down below in the comments section if you're on YouTube. Tom, let's take it back to the top of the episode here. Who wins the NCAA tournament? Who do you think?
Well, obviously your favorites are Michigan and Minnesota. They both have not long droughts, but definite droughts. Michigan hasn't won it in 25 years. Minnesota hasn't won it in 20 years. So it could very well be them. But guys, this is in the NCAA basketball tournament. This isn't college football playoffs or bowl championship series. A lot of times here, the dark horses just don't run to the Frozen Four or run to the national championship.
Yeah.
Sometimes they run all the way and win the whole thing. So I could easily see a St. Cloud State or a Minnesota State walking away with this thing as well, or a Kansas or a Quinnipiac. I could easily see that as well. So it's going to be interesting.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, no matter what, we see a lot of talent in this tournament this year. So find a way to watch it any way you can, first of all. But to me, yeah, Michigan, Minnesota, those are both favorites of mine. I think either of them, depending on the hour, I could say either of them. The dark horse to me is Boston with Drew Comesso. That is just a team to watch. And if they do end up going far, it is going to be on the back of Drew Comesso. And the poor guy's going to need back surgery from how far he's going to carry that team. But as usual, guys, what do you guys think? Do you agree? Do you disagree with our takes? You got to let us know in the comment section down below here if you're on YouTube. And if you're not here on YouTube, let me just say our YouTube channel down below once again, youtube.com/i80 sports. Drop a comment down below. What do you think about Philadelphia in the coming years with their rebuild? And let us know what you think about the NCAA tournament as well. While you're there, drop a like, hit subscribe, and hit the bell notifications. So that way you guys know when we go live, because as we get closer to the NHL playoffs, which is crazy to say that we're getting close to the NHL playoffs, but we're a month away. We're going to be going live probably closer to the NHL playoffs. So you don't want to miss that. The only way you don't miss that, subscribe down below, hit the bell notification. So that way you know when we are live. And if you're on Twitter and you don't currently follow us, make sure you follow us down below at i80_sports NHL. And if you follow us already, thank you guys so much, because we greatly value all of your support. We can't do this on a weekly to bi-weekly basis without you guys. But time to stop talking. Time to start watching some more hockey. Go Devils, or in Tom's case, I guess, go Rangers. Either way, go hockey in general. Go watch some hockey, whether it's NCAA or it's NHL. But until the next episode, I'm Brian. He's Tom. This has been yet another episode of NHL on i80 Sports.